Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 5th online basketball series event held by the New York Carolina Club. Our 4 previous guest speakers have included Larry Miller, Art Chansky, Ron Smith, and John Dahl. My name is David German, and I am the chair of the New York Carolina Club. As mentioned at our last series event, we are proud to once again announce that this basketball speaker series has been renamed the Tommy Kearns New York Carolina Club Basketball Speaker Series in honor of Tommy Kearns, class of 1958 and member of the undefeated 1957 UNC National Championship basketball team we discussed this evening. Tommy has been a tremendous supporter, not only of the University of North Carolina, but the New York Carolina Club as well, for many years, of which we are truly grateful. We are especially delighted that Tommy is one of our speakers for the event this evening. Before I introduce our guest speakers and interviewer, I want to thank 2 people who've been instrumental in setting up our event for this evening. A special thanks goes out to General Alumni Association Coordinator of Outreach for Alumni, Clubs, and Families, Anna Brooks Witcher, and Brecken Brandstrader of the New York Carolina Club Board of Trustees, whose efforts have been instrumental in making this event happen. This evening, we are delighted to have Stephanie Pace, UNC class of 1976 undergraduate and UNC class of 1985 masters, who is the owner-producer of Film NC Capital Management LLC. Stephanie is both writer and director of McGuire's Miracle. And joining her for the discussion, we are thrilled to have 3 members of the 1957 UNC National Championship team, the esteemed gentlemen Tommy Kearns, Joe Quigg, and Bob Young. Hosting the discussion will be Larry Keith, UNC class of 1969. Some background on Larry. He grew up in Charlotte and spent 50 years in New York, 35 years at Sports Illustrated and Time Inc. In his Sports Illustrated career, he was a reporter, writer, senior editor, assistant managing editor, and editorial projects director. Among his many achievements, he created the editorial concept for Sports Illustrated for Kids, wrote 19 cover stories, and was a contributing writer to multiple Sports Illustrated commemorative issues on UNC basketball. Enshrined in the North Carolina Journalism Hall of Fame, Larry is a former member of the New York Carolina Club Board of Trustees, the UNC General Alumni Association Alumni Board, and the UNC School of Media and Journalism's Board of Advisors. The New York Carolina Club thanks our participants for their time in doing this online event. So let us begin. And I now introduce to you Larry Keith.
Thank you, David. I've had the pleasure of viewing some other Carolina Club programs. So tonight I look forward to participating, especially with our outstanding group of panelists. Before we start, though, I'd like to say a word about someone who isn't here, who passed away only a few weeks ago, the legendary Tar Heel Lenny Rosenbluth. In the history of North Carolina basketball, there has been no better player or bigger fan, so let's dedicate this night to him. In fact, look for Lenny in this coming attraction video for McGuire's Miracle.
Well said.
Vital moment. 5 seconds. We've had vital moments, of course, all night long. 54 to 53. All right, it's taken out by Parker. Parker throws the long one into the left side. They feed it into Stilt, and it's tapped away from Stilt by Kearns into the hands of Kearns, and we win it. 54 to 53. North Carolina did it. Joe Quigg left it away. Left it away.
As miracles are said to come from heaven, one of the biggest in sports history, known as McGuire's miracle, came from the southern part of heaven, the location of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. It was the 1956-57 collegiate basketball season when this miracle occurred, as the UNC Tar Heels, led by the dapper New York City Irishman Frank McGuire, racked up a perfect 32-0 season. To cap off a Hollywood ending, the Heels went on to defeat a Wilt Chamberlain-led Kansas Jayhawks team in triple overtime in the NCAA National Championship game in Kansas City, Missouri. The 7'2" tall Chamberlain was a national phenomenon and was thought to be unstoppable. This national championship game did not disappoint. Many sports historians as the greatest collegiate basketball game ever played. Hollywood Central Casting could not have put a team together any better. All of the 56-57 starters were the best of the best players that the New York City metropolitan area had to offer. Lenny Rosenbluth, Joe Quigg, Tommy Kearns, Bob Cunningham, and Pete Brennan. They took a chance and came south with the charismatic McGuire on what came to be known as his famous North to South Underground Railroad. When McGuire and his boys arrived in the land of moonlight and magnolias, they unpacked what was known as City Ball for all to see. As the 56-57 season unfolded, to say that the air in Chapel Hill became electric is an understatement. The entire country fell in love with the University of North Carolina Tar Heels, a group of street-smart New Yorkers who, along with their debonair head coach, took the South by storm.
Let me further set the stage by quoting a few numbers, not of the basketball variety, but some menus around Chapel Hill in 1957. A cheeseburger for 20 cents at Green's, 2 hot dogs for a quarter at the Village Grill, and a hot fudge sundae for 24 cents at Dairyland Farms. A big spender could take his date to see Oklahoma at the Carolina Theater for 85 cents. As for the Final Four tickets in Kansas City, $4 a piece. In a moment, we will meet Stephanie Pace, who wrote and directed McGuire's Miracle. She was a 36-year resident of Chapel Hill, who now resides in Hickory, and for you former Greeks, a Tridelt. Our other guests this evening are 3 outstanding members of that McGuire's Miracle squad. This team of street-hardened New Yorkers, coached by a former New York dock worker, did it the hard way. They played only 8 of their 32 games at home in Woolen Gymnasium. They beat the Final Four Cinderella team, Michigan State, in the semifinals, and the Wilt Chamberlain-led Kansas Jayhawks in the finals on virtually their home floor. Both games were triple overtime. Repeat, 2 triple overtime games on consecutive nights. Those Iron Men here tonight are center forward Bob Young, who left the team at the beginning of the 57 championship season and returned in the second half of that year as a valuable 6th man. How valuable? After All-America and Helms Player of the Year Lenny Rosenbluth fouled out with 1:58 in regulation, Young scored the team's only basket in the first overtime and made other big plays as well. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
By the way, do your math and you'll see that North Carolina played the final 16 minutes and 58 seconds of the game without its leading scorer. That's like the 82 Tar Heels without James Worthy, the 93 champions without Eric Montross, the 2005 champions without Sean May, the 2009 champions without Tyler Hansbrough, and the 2017 champions without Justin Jackson. The 57 Tar Heels were more than a single star. They were a galaxy. Also with us this evening, guard Tommy Kearns, who began the title game jumping center against Chamberlain, a height disadvantage of 14 inches, and ended it by tossing the ball heavenward, beyond even Wilt the Stilt's reach, to run off the final seconds of the third overtime. In between, he made the free throw that sent the game into the first overtime and scored 4 points in the third. Thank you, Tommy. And finally, center Joe Quigg, who made the 2 free throws that lifted Carolina to its 54-53 final advantage, and then secured the victory by knocking away a pass to Chamberlain, who was well positioned to make the winning basket. Both of those key plays are on the video we just saw. Before the game, McGuire had told his team, "Kansas can't beat you, but Chamberlain can." Well, that's true, but only if he had the ball, coach. Only if he had the ball. Thank you, Joe. Now, let me start by asking each of you distinguished gentlemen, 3 questions before turning to Stephanie. The first question is, I know you were all quite successful after you left Carolina. Bring us up to date, and if you want to, include any Carolina-related projects you supported. Bob, let's start with you.
Well, I presently live in Naples, Florida. Get to visit Chapel Hill from time to time. I'm involved with a couple of programs, a poetry program called Tar Heel Verses. And these poems appear in the Daily Tar Heel. And I've been doing that for about 5 years, and it's a wonderful, satisfying effort. And whatever else you want to hear.
Well, you were an executive in my industry, only
Yes.
you were at the New Yorker magazine. I was just at Sports Illustrated.
Yeah, I had the privilege of being at the New Yorker for 25 years. I think we have a mutual friend in Dick Monroe.
Yes, I knew Dick. We were, he was actually one of the finest publishers and company presidents we ever had. Tommy, you're next. If you're,
I worked for Merrill Lynch for 10 years in Greensboro, North Carolina, moved to New York, worked for Bear Stearns in investment banking for just under 20 years. Had a great run, and retired in 1986 or 7, and have just been doing some investing since. One of my great thoughts and feelings about Carolina is that I was chairman of Carolina Performing Arts and at Chapel Hill, and we were able to. I went to Moscow with Emil Kang, who was the head of Performing Arts at the time, and when we went to St. Petersburg, we got the Bolshoi to come to Chapel Hill, which was a great coup, and had a lot of fun with that. Enjoyed it, and Carolina is always in my heart.
that's wonderful. Dr. Joe Quigg, you're next.
Yes, I missed my senior year in preseason practice. I broke my tibia, and back in those days, they had to take out everything, and I was in a cast for 6 months. And when they took the cast off, my arm was bigger than my leg, and I couldn't bend my leg. So that game with Kansas was my last official game with referees and all that kind of stuff. And so that's a good way to go out. After that, I went to dental school for 4 years, 3 years in the military, a captain in Stuttgart, Germany, and 3 of the best years of my life. Carol and I were married, and we have 2 children. And since then, I've been practicing dentistry in Fayetteville, retired in 2000, play a little golf, and of course, got really excited with this year's basketball team. I mean, I was jumping up and down. I couldn't believe what those kids did and what Coach Davis did with that club. And so that was really exciting, almost as good as 57.
I'm curious, what brought all of you New York high school stars to Chapel Hill in the first place? And what role did New York high school talent scout Uncle Harry Godkin play in your being recruited? Bob?
I can answer that.
Okay.
It was Frank McGuire. Frank was a movie star. He was a coach of St. John's. He was good looking. He came in, he charmed my mother and dad. You know, he told them our neighborhood looked just like what he grew up in, and that he would take care of me when we came to Carolina. And you know, so I looked up to him all during the time. He was my idol.
Anything to add, Tommy and Bob?
Well,
He assured us, my parents, that we would still remain Roman Catholics after 4 years.
I'll add by saying that my mother and father were both born in Ireland. So when they heard that Frank McGuire was coming to visit with us, and he was the coach, and they felt that was a good place to be because they had a wonderful Irishman running the team. Other than that, they knew very little about basketball.
Where were the other New York City players that you knew and played against going to school? You guys, came down to North Carolina on the Underground Railroad, but what about some of the other key players that you might have known or played against?
One of the guys that I know that Coach McGuire tried to recruit was a fellow named Johnny Lee. Johnny was a terrific player. He played for Erasmus, I think, in Brooklyn, and he eventually decided, with I think a big nudge from his mother, to go to Yale, and he had a very, very distinguished career at Yale and a very distinguished business career after that. So Johnny's one of the great players that I played against.
Anybody in particular? I think he actually wound up on the cover of Sports Illustrated while he was a player.
What happened
I don't
is
know
that I came to Carolina 6 months before Tommy, Bob Cunningham, and Pete Brennan. Due to World War II, New York you could go to school not only in September, but in January. And I was one of the ones that went in January. And so I graduated in January, and Tommy and Bobby and Pete that was their senior year in high school. So I had that 6 months in. I joined Bob and Lenny on the freshman team when I came in on Sunday. Monday we went to practice. Tuesday we had a game, and Wednesday I went to class, and so right in there.
That's quite an introduction.
And I will add that during that summer, when Pete and Tommy and Bob were a little bit undecided, I was one of the cheerleaders and saying, listen, you guys got to come to Carolina. Now, I didn't tell them, and I didn't know it at the time, but I went to a boys grammar school, Catholic high school, went up to visit Niagara, which was a men's college, and came down and didn't know, but the co-eds couldn't come until they were junior and senior. I was 17 years old, and there wasn't any 20-year-old that I was going to say hello to wouldn't get an answer back, but I didn't tell them all about that.
If Lenny Rosenbluth were still with us, I would ask him to tell a story that I've heard him tell before, where he thought he was going to North Carolina State before he chose Carolina. Thank goodness for that. Can one of you illuminate that story that Lenny told about his tryout?
Well, I can tell you about that. Bob, anyway, he was out of shape, and Case had him down in the summertime, and he came down. He didn't have any sneakers, and he gave him a bad pair of sneakers, and he played, and he didn't do well, and then his feet hurt, and after the practice, and of course, maybe in a day later, Coach Case said, Lenny, I only have one scholarship to give, and I can't waste it on you. And so those were the words.
Lenny also went through that year. He was a senior in high school at James Madison. There was a coach's strike. He didn't play competitively in the senior year. Yeah, and it was a big negative for him.
And I always
made up for it.
And I always say the reason he put on his practice uniform. Lenny was not a practice player. When the game started, he was an All-American. During practice, he was just like everybody else. I mean, he just didn't get motivated in practice. But when the game came, he was best player in the United States.
He was indeed. Much more later for you guys. Now I'd like to introduce Stephanie Pace, whose hard work created McGuire's miracle. Stephanie, your 2-hour, 44-minute video is a tour de force. narrated by Wes Durham, the son of Woody Durham, with 140 pieces of music, 4 voice actors, background and nostalgia from the 50s, plus, of course, plenty of game footage and interviews with many of the players. What inspired you to create this Tar Heel treasure?
Well, thank you for the compliments, first of all. It was a joy and an honor to do this film. And it was hiding in plain sight to be done in this format and with this length. And actually, I had an old reel-to-reel recording of the end of the 57 game that was given to me, good gosh, I don't want to age myself here, but a good while back. And when I was in my 20s, used to play it for after dinner for guests. And they will become very excited hearing the end of this game. We talk about the game. And so a number of circumstances occurred a few years ago that brought this again to the forefront of for me. And it just created the company Film NC Capital Management. And thought that this would just be a terrific story. And being a good Southerner, as I am, and we pride ourselves in being wonderful storytellers, I thought we would do a very nice job on this film. And of course, my heart is with my university, my alma mater. And as I have said many times, this is really my Valentine to the University of North Carolina. And so I feel very good. It was not an easy film to make. And I would laugh with friends and they'd say, why are you working so hard? I mean, this took quite a while to do. And I said, well, I want to keep living in the state of North Carolina. That's why. So.
Well, how long did it take you to complete this magnum opus?
Well, actually about 6 years. And so including the research. And
how's the reception been? Has it been good?
It has been wonderful and actually even beyond my expectations. We have not had one negative review regionally or nationally. And that has really been stunning to me. And of course, I've been very, very pleased because we put everything we had into this film. And regarding the length, if I may say, we started out doing an hour-long documentary and just felt an hour was not by any stretch of the imagination going to do justice. We got to 2 hours, but that didn't do it either. And it kept growing like kudzu. And so then when we finished the cut and we went back and said, well, gosh, how can we cut this down? And, being the Southern lady that I am, and we're persevering and pretty stubborn. And I just looked at it. I said, we're not cutting this film. We're going to put an intermission in the middle and everybody can take a little break, get some popcorn and whatever they would like to drink and come back. But I did not feel with less time that we could do this story justice. And this was the one shot to do this story in this manner. So that is how it came about. And that explains also the length of this film. And so we're very pleased. Very pleased.
Good. I've seen it, obviously, and liked it very much. Thank you for those insights and the wonderful job that you did.
Thank you.
Be back with you later. Right now, I want to kind of continue with the idea of the video by saying that it starts, you put together a marvelous tribute to dapper dandy coach Frank McGuire. He came to Carolina after leading his alma mater, St. John's, to the 1949 College Baseball World Series and the 1952 College Basketball Final Four, where he lost to Kansas and a bench warmer named Dean Smith, by the way. As you know, this year's Tar Heels also lost to Kansas, as did our 1991 and 2008 Final Four teams. This is all the more reason for us to celebrate that glorious night 65 years ago when we rock-chalked the Jayhawks. We seem to be joined at the basketball hip with Kansas anyway over the years. Few people recall that McGuire was quite familiar with Chapel Hill. He had been there before as part of his Navy training during World War II. He turned down the University of Alabama. I can't imagine Frank McGuire in my old home state of Alabama, but that's to come to Carolina after his 52 Final Four appearance. In his very first season, he fulfilled a primary objective by beating NC State to end the Tar Heels' 15-game losing streak against his rival, Everett Case. In Tar Heel history, Dean Smith won more games, Roy Williams won more national championships, but the red-headed Irishman put Carolina basketball on the map. With that, I'll turn to our guest. Bob, Tommy, Joe, is it a fair statement that Frank McGuire, with notable help from all of you, laid the foundation for what Carolina basketball has become?
Bob, I'll let you take that.
Well, no question about it. When you think about his lineage and his wife and his son who required some hospitalization, when he came with an open mind. He was received as well as anyone can imagine, despite his New York accent. And I think that one of the things I should mention is the manner in which we all were received by the Carolina people, the students. It was really remarkable. I can remember coming to Chapel Hill with Lenny Rosenbluth. We got on the train at Penn Station and we got off the train at Raleigh-Durham, and there was a sign colored white, and that sort of sent a message that frankly took us off guard, but it didn't reflect the manner in which we were received by the students. And I think that was an encouraging thing for all of us, and certainly for Coach McGuire.
Joe? Joe, you want to add something to that, or shall I?
Yeah, I think what happened, which was special for us, is C.D. Chesley televised the games. And this is the first time that any of these games were televised. State would always win the ACC tournament and then go away, and people in Raleigh could listen to it on radio, but the rest of the state didn't have it. And then you'd see in the paper they would lose, somewhere. But with us, we had televised those games, and to have a triple overtime on Friday and a triple overtime on Saturday, and the good guys win each time, that was just amazing. And my wife remembers back then she had to call home and ask her parents if she could stay out so that she could watch the overtime.
That's great.
And from then on, I'll just add this.
Okay.
From then on, you would see basketball goals in the driveway and all that were never there before. So I thought that, helped with the birth of basketball in North Carolina.
Oh, absolutely. Bob, question for you. At Carolina, you were on the team and off the team. You were a starter and you were a reserve. After enduring all of that, I have to think that winning the national championship in your final game as a senior was incredibly special.
Yeah, it was indeed. I had some hesitancy there early on during that season when I was not able to play. But returning to the team, McGuire said to me, he said, just stay in shape, work out at the tin can, and we'll get you back. And I had great faith in him. And when I came back, I was thrilled to be a part of the team and make a contribution at the end. It was the culmination of a dream come true. But as Lenny called it early on, that's my phone. Excuse me. Lenny said to Coach McGuire, Lenny said, we're gonna win them all.
Yeah.
That's Tommy Kearns calling me.
No, it's not. Sorry. That's your girlfriend.
He's saying, "Let me talk. You're talking too much." Yeah, but it was a wonderful thing, and I can remember when Lenny fouled out. Of course, we had played together, and he had confidence in me, and he never showed very much emotion. He just expected that I would go in there and do what was required of me. I think we would have probably been a little surprised if he realized I was going to take a shot. It was early.
Well, actually, you took a couple of big shots, and we'll get to those later.
Yeah, well,
Thanks, Bob.
yes, sir.
Tommy, you're heroic.
Yeah, I'll tell you, one of the interesting things to me, I was with Hubert Davis about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about the Final Four, and it was in the dome in New Orleans, and he said, unfortunately, our dressing room was right across the hall from Duke's. So the powers that be at the Superdome were not very sensitive to the relationship between the two schools. Hubert went on to tell me about what the setup was. I mean, we got dressed in a hotel, had to walk 3 blocks to the municipal auditorium, and we were cramped into a little, it wasn't even a locker room. I don't know what the hell it was, but that's where we had a pregame meeting. And it was, and then after the game, when we won the championship, it was raining, and we had to walk 3 blocks in rain to get back to the hotel. And Hubert was telling me that now the setup is they have massage tables all over the locker room. They have a chef. You can, it's just a complete different setup than it was when we were playing.
Certainly
Yeah, a
sounds
little
like
bit, yeah.
Tommy, your heroics were not limited, though, to that Kansas game. Rain and all, and cramped locker room and all. In fact, you and Lenny were both first team All-ACC. One newspaper account lauded your keen playmaking, fancy dribbling, and precision passing. Against Maryland, you made the game-tying basket in regulation and put the Heels ahead to stay in overtime. You hit 2 free throws with 16 seconds left to beat Duke, 75-73. Your 2 free throws in the closing minutes put UNC ahead for good against Wake Forest. You scored 22 points in the East Regionals against Syracuse. Now, here's my question. How is it you were always so positive, so optimistic, so upbeat? Was that New York cool or what?
I think that came, my high school coach was Lou Conaseca. And Lou was a great coach. He was also extremely enthusiastic, and he just led us in the right direction. He promoted us. I mean, he said there's no wall there, just run through it. And so that's kind of the attitude that you had. I had no qualms about anything that we were doing. We were kids from New York who were playing basketball, and all of a sudden we're in the Final Four and winning the ACC, and it was great. And one of the great experiences I had, and I know Joe and Bob feel the same way, is when we came back to the Raleigh-Durham airport. There were 10,000, 15,000 people greeting us, and the pilot had to do a couple of circles around the damn airport before he could land. I mean, it was extraordinary. The reception that we got and the commotion that we created in the state of North Carolina was absolutely fantastic. And after the game, we had a meeting with some of the sports writers up at Coach McGuire's suite, and Governor Hodges was there, and he was just starting the research triangle in Raleigh-Durham, and he just told us what a big thing this was for the state of North Carolina and his project. And he invited us over to the governor's mansion about 2 or 3 weeks later. So we're there. He gave us some food. I don't know what the hell it was. And it was
quail, right?
And I cut it, and I said, God damn, I mean, there's something in this thing. And it was shot. So it was, somebody had gone out and shot some doves, and that's what he was serving us. And that was my first experience with food from being shot out in North Carolina.
One thing I'd like to add about that trip back to Chapel Hill, unfortunately, Lenny was not able to join us, nor was Coach McGuire. They were prepared for an appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show, where they were presented with the All-American team. They were part of that. And Lenny would tell me that one of the things that he just missed terribly was that experience, having all those Carolina folk out there watching us and waiting for the plane to land. So I was sorry Lenny wasn't on the plane.
That's right.
He would have loved that experience.
Larry, let me add something to Tommy's story at the Governor's. When we sat down for dinner, we sat down and there were 3 knives, 3 forks, 6 spoons, and we all looked at Coach McGuire to see which one, and he just went. And so we had to wait until the governor picked up the knife and fork to find out what we had to do.
Hey, Joe, do you remember when I think it was the governor had his plane, he came down anticipating that he would be able to sit on the bench.
Sit on the bench, yeah.
And I think Joel Fleischman, who was a wonderful manager.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Brilliant student who did everything for us. He had to tell the governor, now he didn't say gov, he said, sir, I think you're going to have to go up a row. And thankfully he obliged.
Yeah, that would have been embarrassing indeed.
Tommy, you remember speaking of Joel, we had one manager. Today, there are at least 6, it could be 8 to 10. And poor Joel had to do everything. He refereed the game. He made reservations for the hotels, and he was a straight A student and a great guy.
And the person who preceded him was Ben Lubin.
Oh yeah, Ben, same thing.
McGuire would always find the smartest Jewish guys who knew how to play the game and who were all outstanding students, and they did absolutely everything. I don't know that he could have chosen better with Joel and Ben, and Arthur Einstein preceded Ben Lubin. So you had Fleischman, you had Lubin, and then you had Arthur Einstein. Three guys who could do everything you needed.
All straight A students.
All straight A students.
That's pretty impressive. Let's dig deeper. In its championship season, even before the Final Four, North Carolina won 2 overtime games by 4 points against South Carolina and Maryland, and by 3 points against Big Four rivals Duke and Wake Forest and State. Bob Young, is it true that one of your teammates, Stan Grohl, was dribbling out the clock late in the South Carolina game when he thought the Carolina that was ahead on the scoreboard was North Carolina, when in fact it was South Carolina? Tell us about that.
Well, I'd rather have someone else speak to that. That I was at the tin can working out.
Oh, okay. Well, Joe?
Well, I'll say after that incident, Stan left school.
Well, I first heard Lenny actually tell that story.
Yeah,
so I assume it happened.
Tommy, that was a great story, but I'm not sure that happened. It could have. It could have. I don't know.
Well, it was Lenny's story anyway. Maybe the biggest, this also involves Lenny, maybe the biggest referee call of the season occurred in the ACC tournament against Wake Forest. Wake led 59-58 with less than a minute to play. As you know, in those days, only the tournament winner could advance to the NCAA tournament, even if another team, in this case, North Carolina, was ranked number 1 in the country. Rosenbluth got the ball just below the free throw line, turned to his left, ducked his shoulder, and threw up a hook shot. The ball went in, but did it count? Was it a charge on Rosie or a block on the Wake defender? The scoreboard said 61-59 Carolina. Now, Tommy, you had a good view, and I heard an interview with you once in which you said it was a charge. Were you joking or were you?
No, I never said that. Sorry. But I'll tell you, Bones McKinney wakes up in the middle of the night now. Think about that.
Bones
For the
took
last
it
40
on,
years,
yes.
he wakes up in the middle of the night between 3 and 3:30 in the morning.
The ACC title game was no contest. Carolina beat the Gamecocks 95-75. You were talking about Governor Hodges before. When Lenny stepped out of the game, taken out of the game with his 38 points, the governor, I read, Luther Hodges, climbed down from his seat in the stands and gave Rosenbluth a big hug. The governor was quite a fan. In fact, as we heard told before, he tried to sit on the bench beside McGuire before the Final Four game. For Rosenbluth, Young, and Quigg, that was their last ACC game. Fellas, I wonder who was your biggest conference rival back then. Nowadays, as you know, it used to be Duke, but after what happened last season, they're pretty much yesterday's news now. Was Duke or someone else, maybe State? Who was our big rival then?
Wake Forest.
State was.
Wake Forest?
Well, when I got down there, it was definitely State because they had Reynolds Coliseum and the other Big Four schools didn't have anything close to, and I think that every case and Frank McGuire always had there was a lot of competition there, and I think State early on, and that may have changed as time went on.
Joe, you thought Wake Forest?
Wake Forest because of the year before in the ACC tournament semifinals, they beat us by 12 points or something like that, and that was it. You lost the game, you go home, you're in your room, there's no more. That's the end of the season. You have to wait 6 months till you come back again. And then the next year, we played them 4 times, and I think that we beat them 4 times, but the total may have been something like 13 points. And then we go down to the ACC semifinals, and Lenny takes that wonderful shot and makes it. And that's the most important shot he made all year, all career. Yeah. Again, that would have been it, and we're finished. That was the end of the season. So I mean, they actually hated us. And reunions that we had later, they wouldn't even come over and say hello.
Tommy?
We beat Duke 75-73. And the last game of the year, we're playing at Duke. And Duke was ready for us, and they think they're going to kick us, right? And what Lenny does is he throws 49 points at him. And he absolutely destroyed Duke over at Cameron. That was kind of an interesting time, and he was absolutely fantastic.
And talking about the first Duke game, you said Tommy made those last free throws, but he was on the line about 6 times. We were up 1, down 1, up 1, down 2, and Tommy was on the line, and he made probably 6 free throws in a row to either get us even or get us ahead all during the, that was 10, up and down.
10 in a row.
10.
I guess we could thank Louis Carnesecca for that training.
That's right. That's right.
There you go.
One thing about Louis Carnesecca, he was a baseball coach at St. John's. And when he arrived at St. Anne's prior to when Tommy came in, Larry Tierney, who's a good friend of Tommy's and mine, who went to Villanova, they had to sort of guide him as to what you did on the basketball court. He was a baseball guy.
Wow.
And the beautiful thing about Louis was he just said, hey, guys, I need to learn this game. And Larry was a couple of years ahead of Tommy, but he learned the game from his players.
That's a great story. I had no idea.
He was the freshman. He coached under Frank McGuire, who was the baseball coach at St. John's.
So now we're at the.
One of the people that we shouldn't forget about in this whole conversation is Buck Freeman.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
Buck Freeman was he was a great guy, an extraordinary. He had a master's degree in basketball. He understood everything about the game, where you should position yourself, how you do it. And he was a major plus for us and our team. And I know personally he was extremely helpful to me as a player. And I'm sure that the other guys on our team felt the same way. He was just very, very special.
You're absolutely right, Tommy. That's great. He was just a wonderful fellow. He had me. I was 6'6.5", and all the clinics he would have me shooting 2-hand set shots from top of the foul line. I mean, top of the circle out there during exhibitions. He was just perfect on rotation, how you would hold the ball, what you would do. And, he was just a joy.
His name was James Ambrose Freeman. Very interesting. Some years later, when I was involved with the Frank McGuire Foundation, I got a letter from one of his nephews from Ireland wanting to know how he could get some information. And I sent him to the archives at St. John's University. So it was amazing to get, he'd heard about the Frank McGuire Foundation, and he wrote a letter and we got it and wanted to know about Buck. He was quite a man.
Yeah, I think Buck, when he was at St. John's, the 1-5, I think he was 135 and lost 37 or something like that. He was fantastic.
Yeah, unbelievable.
So win the ACC tournament, and now you're at the Eastern Regional. You beat 3 teams that you should have beaten, and you beat them handily. Yale 90-74, Canisius 87-75, Syracuse 67-58. The only one that was even close to being ranked was Canisius, number 20 in the country. No surprises. Now you're on.
They were not easy games,
Well, in the first half, yes, but in the second half, you pulled away. Correct. Now we're on to the Final Four. The cheerleaders, by the way, I read had to pay their own way to Kansas City, which wouldn't happen today. And there were probably no more than 100 Carolina fans there overall. But it was almost not worth the trip because of what happened against Michigan State, the first game. Not to embarrass anybody, but our 3 guests here tonight combined for 2 field goals in 55 minutes. Obviously, you were saving yourself. Rosenbluth scored 31 points, but he was 12 for 43 from the floor. So thank goodness for the other 2 starters, quintessential 5th man Bob Cunningham and Pete Brennan, who scored 19 and 14 points respectively. The game seemed all but lost when jumping Johnny Green stepped to the line. Michigan State led 64-62, and Green.
Can I tell you something that happened to me at that point?
I'm sorry?
One of the guys from Michigan State came up to me and said, 30-1.
I know that was my that was my question for you. I was going to say Johnny Green stepped to the line with the shoot a 1-and-1 before Green's attempt. Broadcaster Bill Jackson told his North Carolina audience that's all she wrote. At the same time, a Spartan player sauntered over to Tommy Kearns and whispered something. What did he say again, Tommy?
It's 30-1.
30-1. But it didn't work out that way. Go ahead and tell us what happened there.
That's right.
Go ahead and tell us what happened there.
And in that game, I think it was after the first overtime against Michigan State, they had a really good guard, a fellow named Jack Quiggle. And Quiggle shot a ball from half court, and it went in. And it was too late. And I think we all knew that it was too late. Yeah. But it wasn't too late by like 5 or 6 seconds. It was only too late by like 2 or 3. So there was some angst on my part if the referees were going to really disallow it, which of course they did. But that was kind of an anxious moment.
Oh, sure. Because, well, Green misses the free throw, and Pete Brennan rebounds, takes the ball down court and shoots a basket from about 15 feet out and scores. And he said he felt very comfortable because he knew he could shoot from outside, and proved to be true. It sent the game into the second overtime. So back to the after scintillating 2-2 overtime, 4 points scored, Carolina finally asserted itself and eventually won 74-70. So now we're ready for the Final Four. March 23rd, or championship game, March 23rd, 1957, and we're set to play the 19th NCAA Men's Basketball Championship. There's an 11-station television network in place, 5 of those stations in North Carolina. You mentioned C.D. Chesley earlier. The top-ranked and unbeaten Tar Heels are about to face the second-ranked, twice beaten, but 3-point favored nearby home team, Kansas. The Jayhawks had them right where they wanted them. But Carolina had a few ideas to rattle the Kansas team even before the game started. First, the manager, we were just talking about him, set up Carolina's regalia on the Kansas designated bench, forcing the perturbed Jayhawks to take the other bench. And when the teams met at the center jump circle, there was Wilt Chamberlain, the 7'1" sophomore behemoth. And well, Tommy Kearns, take it from here.
Well, I was 6'2" at the time. So
So you're jumping against Wilt Chamberlain to start the Final Four championship game.
yeah, and Coach McGuire had said something about that, and I didn't really know if he was joshing or not. And then we had a pregame meeting, and he said, "Are you ready to jump against Wilt?" And I said, "Let's go, let's do it." And so it was that simple, And I think the background on that was that Coach Freeman had seen something like that happen at a gym in Brooklyn. That he was coaching somebody, and there was a 6'6" guy who owned the one team. I mean, he was the guy who was like Wilt, and they sent out the smallest guy on that team to jump against him, and it was a psychological ploy, and I think it helped us win, and that's what it was all about.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And Tommy later became Wilt's financial advisor. Is that correct, Tom?
Well, I wouldn't be that. No, we did a lot of things together. He was a great guy. I really got to know him very well. Spent a lot of time with him out in Los Angeles, and he's a smart guy, and really, I love the guy. I mean, he was terrific to know as a friend, as a non-competitor, and we had a lot of good times together. And he just died an untimely death, unfortunately. So.
When Coach McGuire passed, Jane McGuire, Frank's wife, invited Wilt to be a pallbearer, but he wasn't up to it at that time. He wasn't feeling well. But I thought that was a wonderful tribute to Chamberlain, and that's how much he meant to our.
Larry, talking about jump ball, Tommy was 0 for 1 against Chamberlain. I was either 0 for 4 or 0 for 3 because back then, every overtime you had a jump ball.
Yeah.
And I think when you started the second half, we may have had a jump ball.
Yeah.
So he was 0 for 1 and I was 0 for 4.
Hey, Joe, you acquitted yourself very nicely at the end of the game.
Yeah.
Carolina.
I was saving myself. Yeah.
Carolina took an early lead, led at the half, and in the second half, Kansas came back and actually led 40-37. Both teams slowing the ball down. When Kansas went ahead 44-41 on a layup, Rosenbluth committed his 5th foul. He was out of the game with 1:45 remaining. Chamberlain looked up at some friends in the stands and thought how groovy it was going to be to celebrate with them later. Kansas, you see, had lined up Louis Armstrong for its post-game celebration. The Jayhawk missed his free throw, and Carolina came on and tied the game 46-all on a basket by Quigg and a free throw by Kearns. Joe, your 15-footer was a huge basket. And Bob, in the last 46 seconds, you had 2 big plays on the offensive boards to keep the ball out of Kansas' hands. After the slow pace early in the half, you guys were suddenly in a dogfight. What was going through your minds?
Joe, take it.
I mean, it was just a basketball game. We knew we had been through everything and we knew what we had to do and just do what we've been doing all along. So,
it was definitely
thank heavens nobody blew up and did something strange. We just stuck to the old pattern.
Good. The first overtime in the history of the Final Four got off to a less than scintillating start. Carolina's only basket came with 3:16 left when Chamberlain came out to guard Quigg, who hit Young for a backdoor layup. Bob, another big play. There was no scoring in the second half overtime, but there was a fight. Carolina's Cunningham fouled Chamberlain, who got into it with Brennan. The bench is empty. Reportedly, a Carolina cheerleader hit Chamberlain with his megaphone, and McGuire claimed that a Kansas assistant coach punched him in the stomach. Tension enough for you? Here's how a Kansas publication reported the melee at the time. Kansas coach Dick Harp said, "I went out to break it up, and Coach McGuire came over to the Carolina bench. I yelled at him that we should break this up and the kids should get back to playing. He must have thought I said something against him, for he got mad. It was my fault. I never should have gone out." Now, the Kansas City reporter doing this story added, after Harp yelled at McGuire, he turned and went back to the bench, unaware that the irate McGuire was following him. McGuire was restrained as he went to the KU bench, but he shouted to Harp, "You phony you, I'll punch you right in the nose." No blows came, however. Later, Harp headed over to the Carolina bench. McGuire got up. Fireworks were suspected, but Harp stuck out his hand and the two shook, and that ended the trouble. Joe, did that contra temps have any effect on the outcome of the game?
No, I didn't even know that was happening.
Okay.
We were someplace else that was happening there. We were sort of catching our breath. I knew about it later on when we saw the film.
Yeah.
I think that Pete Brennan did shake hands with Will Chamberlain.
Chamberlain, yes.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a nice thing that sort of
Indeed.
ended the strife and the stress.
Third overtime. Kearns scored the first 4 points on a layup and 2 free throws after making only one of his previous 6 attempts. Chamberlain's 3-point play. What? Yeah, well, no, this is called fair and balanced. Fair and balanced.
Yeah.
Chamberlain's 3-point play and another Kansas free throw tied the score, and another charity toss put the Jayhawks ahead 53-52 with a half-minute remaining. So here's the situation. Carolina ball, Kearns drives the lane, but Wilt blocks his layup attempt with 11 seconds left. Tommy, what were you thinking driving on Chamberlain?
No, it was not a layup. I knew exactly what I was doing.
Okay.
Because Coach Freeman said that what you have to do with him, if you get within 15 feet, what you have to do is try. You're not going to get anything. You can't go to the hoop. What you have to do is think about a bank shot. And I was perfectly situated for a bank shot on the right side. I knew exactly where I was going to put it, and I'll tell you, it was going in. And Will just came out of nowhere and knocked it in the stands someplace. I never saw where he was, but he made a sensational play on that.
So you retain possession, and this time Quigg drives on Chamberlain, and again, Wilt blocks his attempt, but lo and behold, Jayhawk Maurice King has committed a foul. Thank you, Maurice. Joe, the ball is in your hands. Take it away.
Well, Bob Cunningham took it out, gave it to Bob. I was at about the foul line on the left-hand side and got the ball. Chamberlain was right in front of me. I thought about quickly jump shot, but with his reach and all, we thought it. And I said, all right, what I have to do is take it to the basket, try to make some contact. And I did. And thank heavens the whistle blew and they called a foul. And so I had 2 free throws. When Frank McGuire called timeout, usually the other team calls timeout to sort of ice you. And because I was 20 years old and didn't know any better, I said, Coach, I'm going to make him, and I felt good. It was just there. It was like the end of the game. I was ready to get through with this. And as I left the huddle, Coach Buck Freeman grabbed me, said, Joe, on your toes. And that's the only thing I thought about. I didn't think about anything else. I said, when I released the ball, and fortunately, the first one went in, and then the second was automatic, after that first one went in. And then we had to worry about them get the ball, and they had some strange deal where back then, if you took it out and called timeout, you would get it at half court. I don't know anything about that or how that goes, but anyway, so they had the ball at half court with about 6 seconds to go.
They had the ball at half court and they bring it in, and the play is to get the ball inside to Chamberlain. And once again, Joe, you're Johnny on the spot.
Well, Danny Lantz came in for Bob, and Danny was playing somebody in the corner man to man, and I was yelling, Danny, get here, because I didn't play Chamberlain. 4 of us played Chamberlain. We had him around all day, and luckily the ball was thrown in, and I was up to get it. And Stephanie, usually on that thing, from all the film that I had seen, the ball goes in and then the ball comes out and it doesn't show anything. And Stephanie found a Kansas film. And if I would say myself, Joe Quigg really got up then and got that ball. And so,
Yes, he did.
And so hit it. Tommy threw it in the air, and we were national champions.
Were indeed. You had a quote at one time. You said, if I hadn't made those free throws, I'd probably have been practicing dentistry in Brooklyn, New York, and people would be saying, there's the guy who missed those free throws.
That's right. That's
but
right.
He said you made the free throws.
On television in overtime. That's a bad time to miss.
Carol would not have let him get to New York. So,
Tommy, at the very end, the ball was in your hands. Famous scene and picture of you throwing the ball skyward. What were you thinking?
Well,
Was that something
you didn't realize that I was a math major at Chapel Hill. So I knew when I threw it up, it was going to take more than 4 seconds to come down.
And there was no way even Wilt the Still could make a play on it.
I didn't want to. You told me I already shot 50% from the foul line. I didn't want to get fouled.
A few final notes on the events in Kansas City. Chamberlain, constantly harassed, led the game with 23 points and 14 rebounds and was named MVP. But he declared it the most painful loss of his life. That life would take a funny turn, though. You know the time he scored 100 points for the Philadelphia Warriors? His coach was none other than Frank McGuire. And you know who his financial advisor was? Well, Tommy Kearns. Small world, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how about this? Dick Hart finished his coaching career as an assistant to one of his former Kansas players, Dean Smith. And how did that former Kansas player wind up at Carolina? On the recommendation of Smith's boss at Air Force, Bob Spear, Frank McGuire offered Smith a job on that very same Final Four weekend to start in 1958. You can't make these things up, and no one could have imagined or dreamed up the 1957 Tar Heels McGuire's miracle. Before opening up for audience questions, I'm going to let the great Lenny Rosenbluth have the final word. 3 years ago, Lenny, Joe, and Tommy joined Jones Angel on the Carolina Insider podcast. Jones, the Tar Heels play-by-play announcer, asked Rosenbluth about a return visit he had made in 2013 to Kansas City's Municipal Auditorium. It stirred this poignant recollection. Allow me to play it for you now.
Tremendous. I was going to cry, but I fought back the tears. It was just going back in time. Everything stayed the same. The Art Deco, I guess, ever was. And you walked into the gym, and by now they had lights because it was dark as the dickens when we played in this. And it was just going back and knowing all the players who passed away, and where we were sitting over there. And it brings back a lot of memories, especially for the guys that, we're here, 3 of the starting 5. Pete Brennan passed away a few years ago, and Bobby many years ago, and you miss them. You play with someone for 2 years. I played only 2 years with you, but I feel like you're my brothers. And when someone passes away, you feel bad for them and their family. And like I say, I'm 86 years old. I don't know how many more years or months or weeks or what happens, but I always think back.
Lenny, you're only halfway there.
I hope so. But you think back on the players, the times we had, and the laughs we had, because we were a loose team. I mean, we're undefeated. People are going crazy in North Carolina, but we're as loose as can be. We're laughing half the time. Going back to Kansas City just brought back, so many memories. And when they had the billboard there, "Welcome back, Lenny," I thought that was great. I really did. And it was fabulous.
And you?
So that was, I thought, a very poignant and appropriate denouement from Lenny Rosenbluth. Now it's time for questions from our audience. If they have some, we'd be happy to let you ask questions of these three former Tar Heel greats. In the meantime, I don't see any on my chat box yet. This is where it should be, I believe.
The chat box, not that way.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Okay, Stephanie. Have somebody.
In the meantime, I do have another question for Stephanie, though, while people get their questions online. Stephanie.
For questions. Do you have a
I
question?
have to put it in.
I'll do it. Do you have a question?
No, it's not a question. It's giving history.
Stephanie,
Of Uncle Harry, my uncle, I want to give him history.
are there any, Stephanie, are there any particular gems of information? We've heard a lot here tonight, but are there any particular gems of information or content that were in your great film that we didn't cover that you would like to bring out about the 57 team?
Well, of course, we had many stories from which to choose, and some I could tell and some I couldn't. But I think one of the most interesting stories was really what I was told by Frank McGuire's two daughters about the intense love between Frank McGuire and his wife, Pat. And both said independently of each other to me that they almost felt like interlopers in the marriage because their parents were so complete and so happy with one another. And I thought that was so interesting. And one of the things in the film, we did accentuate Pat McGuire and had a voice actor, of course, who did, Catherine Goforth, who did a fabulous job to bring some warmth to the story and a little bit of a feminine perspective in the sea of masculinity and testosterone for this film. But I thought that was so incredibly poignant. And also, we tried to balance McGuire with his warmth, and also, but he came up on the streets, and I think one of the most interesting stories that really shows his power to a great degree was a dinner in a private dining room in New York. And he was entertaining the press, which he did constantly. And previously, I believe the week before, a reporter who shall remain nameless with the Chapel Hill News violated a trust. McGuire told him something, and this particular reporter printed it. And so in this private dining room in New York, these men are enjoying their scotch and cigars, etc. And this reporter opened the door and came in. And I was told everything just went stone cold quiet. And Coach McGuire just simply stood up, looked forward. He didn't even look at the reporter. And he said, "Get up and get out of my sight." And said this reporter just slinked right out of the room. Coach McGuire sat down, straightened his cufflinks, and picked up his scarf.
Just in his time.
Stephanie,
Yeah, well,
Stephanie, Can you
Yes.
tell the listeners how they can get McGuire's Miracle?
Yes, I can. We have a dedicated website called McGuire's Miracle Documentary.com, and it's also available on Amazon. And as a matter of fact, here's the DVD, and just happen to have a few here. And so it is available for order, and the shipments go out right away. So if you order, you'll have it within a matter of days. Thank you, Joe, for asking.
The question, Bob, I'm not seeing any questions on my.
Michael Gotkin, would you like to go ahead and just ask on screen a question?
Yes, what I want to tell is that my uncle was Uncle Harry. And I want to give some information. My uncle did recruit most of the starting five who was there on the team. And the reason why my uncle created the Underground Railroad was because an Irish Catholic defended a Brooklyn Jew. And the Brooklyn Jew was my father, Java Gotkin, who starred on the St. John's team with Frank McGuire in 32 to 36. And Frank McGuire, because he didn't like to hear the other teams that they played where there was anti-Semitism said against my father, not at St. John's. They were not like that at all. But other teams that they played, Frank McGuire used to go over because he was a boxer also. And he defended my father on the basketball court. And that's the reason why my father's oldest brother, Uncle Harry, wanted to pay tribute to him and became his New York City basketball scout. And Sports Illustrated have articles about this, and with my picture of my Uncle Harry. And this is the basic reason why North Carolina, Chapel Hill, is a star. It was a powerhouse in basketball and took it away from NC State with Everett Case because an Irish Catholic actually defended a Brooklyn Jew. And my uncle recognized that. And in Frank McGuire and my father was on the basketball team that was at St. John's, which turned out they had the first collegiate doubleheader at Madison Square Garden in the 30s. And 50 years later, they both and some other the teams came to the Garden and received a plaque.
That's a very nice story. Thank you.
Michael,
Yes.
I loved your uncle. If I may, I'd like to, Harry, do a little impersonation. Uncle Harry would come and say, Joey, come to Carolina, you'll be a dentist.
That's it.
And he was the guy that got me interested in Carolina and was there all the time. Just the nicest guy in the world.
That's it.
Wonderful.
And if you remember, he was always well dressed with silk hankies in his suit.
Yeah.
And when my uncle passed away, Frank McGuire asked me to I called him up and I sent to Frank McGuire all his silk hankies.
Oh my goodness, great.
Yes. And North Carolina State also had Davy Gotkin.
A nice man.
Davy Gotkin was my father's first cousin, and Davy Gotkin's older brother was Hy Gotkin, who started St. John's in the 40s. So in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, there was a famous Gotkin basketball star.
That's great.
That's excellent. That's terrific.
And I'm happy to see, and I was very disappointed when I saw Lenny Rosenbluth's obituary.
Yeah.
And I'm very upset. And I have a particular personal feeling about the five who were the started five on the 57 team. And I have that relationship all my life because I had basketball family. But I played baseball because I was too short.
Let me, we have a question here from someone asking for the players. This is for all the players. Have you ever rewatched the entire 57 game? And if so, what stands out to you the most about it? Just watching a replay
I
of the
think
entire game.
what happened, what stands out to me, I thought Kansas made some real big mistakes. Back then, you didn't have a shot clock. They came down in one of those overtimes that we didn't score anything. They held the ball. They came down, and I think, you know, they were out just passing it around. We were back in our zone, and we said, you know, we don't have Lenny. Do whatever you want out there. And they kept it and, you know, waited until the last minute and took a shot. And I thought that was really silly. But the fact that we could play slow, in other words, we averaged almost 80 points a game. But playing against Chamberlain, we were not going to run up and down. We took the time, and we didn't have a shot clock that made that possible.
Also, Dick Arp was in his first year coaching Kansas. He had the previous coach who had recruited Chamberlain, I've forgotten his name.
Fog Allen.
Fog Allen could not coach beyond his 70th year. So Arp was not an experienced coach, and that may have been a factor.
Well, gentlemen, this has been a great evening.
That when that happened, he thought about leaving Kansas because that was not part of his deal. He had assured Wilt that he was going to be there for 4 years, and so a lot of mystery.
Well, time to go, I guess.
Thank you, everybody. I would like to express my great appreciation to Stephanie, Bob, Tommy, Joe, and the New York Carolina Club. It's been a blast. Go Eagles.
You've done a great job.
Larry. Thank you.
Go Bills. Thank you, Gary.
Stephanie, thank you for the film.
Good to see you, Stephanie.
Thank
And on
you.
behalf of the New York Carolina Club, I want to thank Stephanie, Tommy, Joe, Bob, and Larry for a really engaging session this evening. I hope you all have the opportunity to watch McGuire's Miracle, as it is a documentary that college basketball fans will delight in viewing. So thank you all for being here tonight, for joining us, and have a wonderful remainder of your evening. Thank you, everybody.